My brother-in-law offered me $100,000 to be their surrogate without telling my sister. I'm 28. My sister Emily is 33, married to Greg for 6 years. They've been trying for a baby forever. Multiple IVF rounds. Nothing worked. Emily would come over after each failed attempt, crying on my couch. I watched her go through the hormone shots, the disappointment, the hope that died a little more each time. She'd stopped talking about baby names, stopped following pregnancy accounts on Instagram. The light in her eyes had dimmed. Last month, Greg texted me out of nowhere, asked if I wanted to grab coffee, said he needed advice about Emily's birthday gift. I figured he wanted help picking jewelry or planning a surprise trip, something to cheer her up after everything they'd been through. When I showed up at the Starbucks near his office, he was already sitting in the corner booth, looking nervous, dark circles under his eyes. Hadn't shaved in days. He slid an envelope across the table before I even ordered. Inside was a check for $100,000 and a surrogacy contract, professionally printed, my name already filled in. My hands were shaking holding it. He started talking fast, said Emily's doctor told him her uterus couldn't carry a pregnancy, scarring from all the procedures. They needed a surrogate but couldn't afford agency fees. Those run $150,000 minimum, sometimes more. He figured since we're family, I'd do it cheaper. The $100K was triple what I made in a year as a teacher. He said Emily didn't know yet because he wanted to secure me first as a surprise, wanted to present her with a solution already wrapped up, like a gift. He'd researched everything, had a clinic picked out 3 hours away that specialized in family surrogacy, had a lawyer ready to draw up paperwork, said we could start the process next month if I agreed, maybe have a baby by next Christmas. Something felt wrong, not just the amount, the way he was looking at me, desperate, almost manic. His leg was bouncing under the table. He kept checking his phone. I told him I needed to think about it. He nodded but grabbed my wrist before I could leave, said this was time sensitive, that Emily was slipping away from him, that their marriage wouldn't survive if they couldn't have a baby. That night, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Greg texting every hour, upping the offer, $120,000, then $150,000, said they'd cover all medical costs, maternity clothes, lost wages, every single expense. He sent me links to luxury vacation packages in Bali and Greece they'd send me on after delivery, all-inclusive resorts, first-class flights, spa treatments. He was throwing everything at me. The next day, another text, a $175,000 final offer. He said I could quit my job, take a year off. They'd support me completely. This felt insane. Where was he getting this money? They'd been struggling with IVF costs. Emily had mentioned selling her car last year to afford another round. I tried calling Emily twice. Both times it went to voicemail. I finally reached her on the third try, asked how she was doing with the fertility stuff. She went quiet. I could hear her breathing change, the TV muted in the background. Then she said they'd stopped trying months ago. Back in February, they were looking into adoption instead. She said Greg had agreed they were done with the biological kid dream, that they'd had a long conversation about it and he finally accepted her decision to move on. She actually sounded relieved, lighter than she'd been in years. My stomach dropped. I asked if Greg had mentioned surrogacy recently. Another long pause. She said no, why would he? They couldn't afford it and she was done putting her body through procedures. She was ready to start the adoption process in the fall. I told her everything. The coffee meeting, the check sitting in my purse, the contract with my name on it, the climbing offers, the texts, the vacation packages. She didn't say anything for a long time. I could hear her breathing getting faster. Then she just said, I need to go, and hung up. An hour later, Greg called screaming, said I'd ruined everything, that I had no right to tell Emily, that he had a plan to fix their marriage, that the baby would have saved them, that she'd been pulling away from him and this was supposed to bring her back, make her need him again. I hung up on him. Emily called me at midnight. She was at our dad's house, packed a bag and left while Greg was in the shower. She'd confronted him and he'd finally broken down, told her everything, confessed to things she didn't even know to ask about. Turns out Greg had been draining their savings on failed IVF without Emily's knowledge. She thought they'd spent $50,000 total. The real number was over $200,000. He'd maxed out 3 credit cards she didn't know about, taken out a second mortgage on their house without telling her, forged her signature on loan documents, used her social security number to open new accounts. He was going to use my surrogacy to trap Emily into staying by giving her the one thing she'd always wanted, except the $100,000 he offered me was Emily's entire inheritance from her grandmother that she didn't know he'd already stolen and spent on fertility treatments that Emily thought they'd stopped paying for months ago. Greg's now facing fraud charges and Emily's filing for divorce.